I challenged and y'all answered. In episode 4, I opened my show with a little bit of a rant on fall camp and the takes that can come out of them, but then I gave y'all a task. I said, give me one player that you believe is due for a breakout season in 2023 for the Florida Gators. And let me just say, I loved the responses. And I tried to share some of my thoughts on each of them in the comments. And so if you haven't seen my reply to your comment, or if I didn't get to it, I'm sorry. But if you haven't seen it, finish watching this one, of course, but then go check that out because I love interacting with y'all. That's going to be one of my favorite things that I do with this channel, interaction. And so go give that a look. But as a result of getting over the 10 comment threshold that I set out, I wanted to open today's show by giving two candidates of my own to fill some prominent roles in the Gators on the Gators squad in 2023. One on offense and one on defense. But before I do that, I want to preface when I think of breakout players, when I think of players that are going to contribute for Florida that maybe are flying under the radar right now or have, are just looking to take that next step, I don't necessarily think of freshmen. And I know freshmen are, especially with the class Florida just brought in, that's going to be the number one thing that pops in a lot of people's head. You're going to say Andy Jean, breakout player. Eugene Wilson, breakout player. Someone said Will Norman, defensive lineman, breakout player. There's a lot of pieces that from the freshman group that are going to perform this year, but that's not what pops into my head immediately. I think of tenured players, at least second year or beyond, that I think are right on that cusp of being high-level contributors for the Florida team in 2023 and beyond. And it just so happens that my two players from the, on offense and defense are from the 2022 recruiting class. They both dealt with injuries last year, and they're coming back looking to make a strong impact for Billy Napier's squad this season now that they're cleared to fully go. But before we even get into it, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and I have a new challenge for y'all. Comment which game on Florida's slate you're most excited to see, most looking forward to in the 2023 season. Do it now. Don't worry. I'll wait. Go do it. Yeah, man. All right. Thank y'all. Appreciate y'all. But yeah, welcome to CARROLL'S Cadence, baby. Let's have a great Friday. First of all, the weekend's here. I know you can use this to get you through the last few hours of work today. But football was played last night. We had the preseason game between the Jets and the Browns in the Hall of Fame game in Canton, Ohio. So there's no reason for today not to be a good day. It's a good day to have a good day. You heard? So, anyways, breakout player on tap. Here we go. I'm excited for two players. Like I said, I'm going to run two. Offensively, we're looking at tight end Arlis Boardingham. And I just want to preface, this isn't going to be a fan show. This isn't going to be a show where I get on here and I only say glowing things about Florida. I'm going to try to give you the truth. I'm going to try to be as objective as possible when it comes to covering the Gators. That's part of my job with Sports Illustrated All Gators is being objective and covering the news in a way that doesn't portray one way or another. But this platform allows me to kind of give more opinion. I can share exactly what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking with all of you, which is something that I love about it so much because I do enjoy when, just being able to express myself. And if that means that y'all enjoy it too, wonderful. That's exactly what we're looking for here. But Arlis Boardingham is one of those people that, there might be times where I feel differently than the consensus fan base opinion on a player. DeJuan Black, for example, was one that I did think he had a high ceiling, but I wasn't sure if he would be able to produce at Florida. He's now at Temple. And he never really, outside of the Tennessee game where he recovered that onside kick, gave Florida an opportunity to go down and score late. He never lived up to the hype that he garnered really coming out of high school and then again coming out of community college. But when I tell you the hype for Arlis Boardingham that's going on right now is real, let me tell y'all, it's real. Arlis Boardingham is that dude. He's 6'3", 245 pounds, kind of a middling tight end, kind of in stature in terms of he's not going to be the big bruiser at tight end that, you used to see in the past. And he's not necessarily going to be the Kyle Pitts where he's a slender slot wide receiver type tight end, but he's a good mix of the two. He's a fluid mover, creates separation with a mix of deceiving speed and power at the top of his routes, can really create well just in his route running ability. I think he has a wide receiver skill set in terms of just him being able to track the football, one, while it's in the air, and two, just to rise above the defense, rise above the defender, and high point balls and jump ball scenarios. And that immediately makes him a big factor in this Florida passing game, in my opinion. I think that there's a lot that you can take from a guy of his height and weight and stature in general to utilize with how Florida wants to pass the football this year. He's a short yardage target. He's a goal line target that can really take this next step if Florida looks to kind of use him in that pass catcher role, which I don't see any reason why they shouldn't want to do that. Obviously, there's been some reservations with Napier in the past in terms of not wanting to, or not, it's not necessarily a want, but he hasn't used them as consistently as we've seen other teams do so in years past, especially with Dan Mullen at the helm, things like that. So you're looking at how Florida wants to use Arlis Boardingham this year. I think that it's going to be a drastic difference from what Napier has done. He did last year, what he did at Louisiana Lafayette, because he's actually a piece that can be that target. And that's not necessarily saying that Keon Zipperer wasn't that for Florida this year, but I think Arlis Boardingham brings another dimension to this Florida offense that will allow him to do that at a higher volume, especially with who Florida has going in to start at quarterback. Graham Mertz, while at Wisconsin, if you go back and watch his tape, obviously week 1 against Illinois in 2020, firing on all cylinders, 5 touchdowns, excellent game from Graham Mertz. And then it started just a kind of slow decline. And then in his final year, it declined drastically. And I think a big reason for that drastic decline from Mertz wasn't necessarily the fact that he didn't have weapons, but he didn't have a certain weapon that he relied upon so consistently in years 1 and 2, in 2020 and 2021, in tight end Jake Ferguson. And Ferguson kind of was the piece that Wisconsin needed for Mertz to just keep steady, keep consistent, play football, and allow him to kind of perform in a way that didn't necessarily win them games, but it didn't lose them games either. So you have Ferguson as a dynamic, big, middle of the field target that was playing into the strengths of a quarterback who loves to use the middle of the field, loves to throw it to the big guys. And that's when he was at his best. When targeting the middle of the field, targeting Ferguson, he was at his best. I think Boardingham can be that for Graham Mertz this year. And as a result, Boardingham will be the one that sees the dividends paid for just playing in a system that can potentially cater to the tight end. Because I think, we're going to see a lot of how Florida wants to operate in 2 tight end sets and things like that. Just play in a way that allows them to rush the football. But you can be so creative with what you do outside of that, how you add on top of that. And you put Arlis in that second tight end role, allow him to, work vertical, work up the field, kind of play over the middle, and just be that safety blanket for Mertz all season long. There's nothing telling me, there's no part of Arlis Boardingham's game that's telling me there should be any red flags regarding him, his ability to perform as a pass catcher in this Florida offense. Obviously, you're going to have ups and downs with him as a run blocker. You're going to have times where he's not on the field. He's not going to be that number 1 tight end, because that's what Florida looks for in their tight ends, is being able to kind of spring open the Montreal Johnsons, the Trevor Etiennes, etc. But when it comes to you need a guy running over the middle field on 2nd and 10 from the 13-yard line to try to push into the end zone, or just get it a first down to reset the chain so you can have another opportunity to punch it in. He's your guy. And I think as a result, he's your offensive breakout player of the year. Defensively, my eyes shift to the secondary and Devin Moore from Naples. Second-year player, just like Arlis Boardingham, recovering from injury, just like Arlis Boardingham. But in my eyes, Moore is probably going to be the bigger breakout player of the two, because as Boardingham's going to have that role, that specified niche that he plays into, Moore is going to be the cornerback 2 opposite of Jason Marshall Jr. this year. And that's where I think that Moore is as a player. Obviously, there's going to be some competition with him and Jalen Kimber. I think they rotate consistently in that back end. But if he's fully healthy, he's simply the best of what Florida has to offer beside the number one or the first round pick potential in Jason Marshall Jr. come the 2024 NFL draft. He's the next man up in that Gators cornerback room, and I think that starts to show this year. There's a reason that he's been so coveted, or why he was so coveted and then continued to earn praise when he arrived on campus last year. He's long, he's fast, he's physical, and he brings all the traits you need to play and excel at that near side corner spot, especially in a defense that's going to be heavy press man, as he said on Thursday under Armstrong. They're going to run a lot of press man. They're going to want to be physical at the line of scrimmage. They're going to play deny the ball defense. And that's exactly the type of player Devin Moore is. He's a deny the ball defender. He's a press man. I want to get up in your face. I want to jam you at the line of scrimmage, throw you off your route, throw off timing with the quarterback, and play some freaking football. That's how Devin Moore plays football. That's how Jason Marshall Jr. likes to play football. And I think as a result, not only will the Moore kind of elevate himself into that cornerback 2 spot, but that secondary should be much improved from previous years. And I know it's a sight for sore eyes, a sound for bleeding ears, whatever you want to say. That's a positive for Florida moving forward. And that's all of that isn't even to mention what Devin Moore is able to do as a tackler. Because we saw at points last season, he showcased he was almost a better open field tackler than anything Florida had to offer in that secondary. He showed it. He was one of the unsung heroes against Utah in week 1 of last year. If you go back and watch that game, there's a play that he makes in, I think it's inside the 20-yard line against Money Parks, where he keeps him in bounds off a quick pass, a quick out pass from Cam Rising, keeps him in bounds, forces Utah to use a timeout with like 30-some seconds left in the game. That was a true freshman in his first appearance. The first time he put on his pads, threw on his orange and blue jersey and said, all right, it's time to rock. I'm a Gator now. He comes out and he makes a play that probably helped win. It definitely helped Florida win the game, but it probably won them that game because there was a lot of commotion going on before the final play of the game where Amari Burney was able to jump Cam Rising's pass and intercept it and make what was arguably the best play of the season by Florida last year by a guy not named Anthony Richardson. So you see him do that. You see Devin Moore come out and make that big of an impact immediately. That tells me all I need to know. That's all I need to know. He's going to be a dog when he is fully healthy, when he's back in that cornerback 2 role, which he was playing at that point in time against Utah in a game that Florida was slipping through their grips. They had it, and it was slipping through their grips on that final drive. Devin Moore made sure that he was doing what he needed to do to ensure that was not the case, that Florida was able to maintain its lead, maintain the victory, and walk out of the swamp as the only ones that were alive. So he's healthy now. The Devin Moore show is coming back to Gainesville. It's coming back to Florida in year 2. So all I'm going to say is buckle up, enjoy the ride, because Devin Moore is the truth. And speaking of guys who are the truth, that, we're seeing guys suffer from injury or return from injury from last season. Florida saw a key defender go down on Wednesday in fall camp with a knee injury. And it's obviously at this point in the season, you don't want to see injuries. You don't want to see that attrition is already starting to wear on teams, especially in the first unit. But that's where Florida's at right now. It happened to him a bit last year with Ricky Pearsall going through some early camp. He was banged up early in camp, got on the field again for Utah, played a little bit in the remainder of fall camp, but was very limited in just being, as they made sure that they were taking care of him, making sure that he was ready to go in week 1. And now Florida's having to deal with the same thing with all-SEC freshman Shemar James from a year ago. So all Gators, Zach Goodall, the publisher over at All Gators, my colleague, was the one who initially reported James's injury. Initially reported that he had went down with a lower body injury. It was actually a knee injury that he suffered. We've had some conflicting reports regarding the severity of it. Initially, it came out that it could be significant and he could miss a considerable amount of time. But personally, I was told it was more minor and that he'd only be held out for a week or two. But I don't like to play the speculation game because I don't think anybody wins by that. If I say I'm right, great. Someone's still injured. Or like whatever I say, if I'm wrong, it's even worse because then I'm saying something that's not necessarily true and potentially damaging to the program and damaging to the kid that is now, instead of being 1 to 2 weeks, he's months and months, and I just played it off like it was no big deal. So no one wins by that. I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, maybe he has this, maybe he has that. That's not what this show is. But I will say it's seemingly more likely that it's the latter in terms of him and not being as significant than it is being super significant and him missing a considerable amount of time. But we all know how crucial James is to this defense this year. He's arguably the face of this defense. He's outside of Jason Marshall Jr., he is the guy on this defense this year. So that kind of marks the question and brings up a bigger storyline for not just right now, but down the line. What if James isn't healthy at points this year? What if he does miss time with an injury, or maybe it's not this injury, just in general? And I know we've kind of jumped into this channel being very positional evaluation heavy, which I love doing that. I love breaking down position by position in the offseason, getting to really know the guys in each position group and know what you're looking at, so that when the year comes, you not only know who's out on the field, but the pieces that can potentially replace them. So I'm going to continue doing that because this leads us right into another, and that's at the linebacker spot, the second level. It's a unit that's filled with guys that are either very experienced and very talented, or they're very green. And at least in green, it's at least when it comes to SEC ball. There's not much in between. There's not a guy that's played a little bit. There's not a guy that's played, some that can potentially come in and perform, but he just hasn't gotten that starting role yet. They don't have that. They have Derek Wingo and Taraja Mitchell at middle linebacker, which I expect both of them to rotate pretty much all the time. I expect him to nearly split snaps this year. I'm not sure exactly which one's going to start. I think that competition's still open, but we'll see times where those two are playing almost in a near perfect split of snaps. You might see Scooby Williams come in from time to time, but in mainly it's going to be Wingo and Mitchell. And while that competition is still open, due to the circumstances, due to the topic of discussion today, that's not necessarily the spot that I think is of note in Jay Bateman's room today, because yesterday's topic of discussion ain't today's topic of discussion. Yesterday's topic of discussion ain't today's topic of discussion. Shout out Fat Joe. But behind James, there's a trio of guys named Manny Nunnery from Houston, Deuce Spurlock from Michigan, and Jaden Robinson from the high school level, Columbia. 3 new faces in that linebacker room. And they all bring a little something different to that weak side linebacker position, the will spot. And when I look at this room, I automatically look at the one from Houston, Manny Nunnery, as the number 2 here, behind Shemar James. And he earned praise this spring for his athleticism, his freakish athleticism, as a lot of guys said. And I think that there's no reason to think that he would show otherwise when he got to Florida's campus, even though he's playing against higher tier athletes than he did in the AAC and things like that. Because if you watch his film at Houston, he was impressive. He from a physical standpoint, from a trait standpoint, from an athleticism standpoint, he is top tier. He was an impressive special teamer, won National Special Teams Player of the Year in 2021. And in that year, he blocked 3 punts, blocked 2 kicks, and he showed exactly the 2 things that when I see someone be able to do that, I look at them, I go, that guy has burst and that guy has length. Because you got to get off the snap quickly to be able to block kicks, and you got to be long to be able to get your finger on them, especially if it's 5. 5 is not a mistake. You don't block 5 kicks by mistake. That happens from preparation, from burst, from being long and athletic. That's the only way that's going to happen. It seems, in my not so professional opinion, those seem like good traits for a linebacker, especially in the SEC. You like to have that. That's what you want. Florida's looking to get some uber athletic linebackers in the second level. And that's what the direction Florida's headed. You got Miles Graham coming in, Adarius Hayes, you have Aaron Childs Jr., guys that are going to be similar to what Florida wants from Nunnery this year. And it's similar to what Florida fans wanted from DeJuan Black. And I know, crazy. I brought him up twice in one episode. Never thought I'd do that. But he may not have his 6'3" frame and be as just have as much potential, have as high of a ceiling as Black did. But when you're talking about an athletic, new era coverage backer type that many thought Black would be, that's Nunnery. That's Nunnery. And then obviously you factor in the third phase of the game, the ability he's able to bring in kick coverage, punt coverage, punt block, kick block, etc. An area Florida struggled in, just a special teams unit, a game changers unit that Florida has sleptwalked in the past 2-3 seasons in a row. Nunnery is a perfect piece for this team. He accounted for 81 tackles, 3.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups, and a forced fumble over 4 years in H-Town. Saw 7 starts in 11 games last year, 43 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 pass breakups, a sack, and a quarterback hurry. He can do it all. He showed he can do it all, right? Like, that's what you want from a linebacker. That's what you want from your second-level defenders, and he brings just that. So there's always going to be questions here because you want to ask, can you trust him to fill a gap and play heads up in the hole against a running back? Seems like he can. Can he work laterally to where he can play sideline to sideline and cut off a running back trying to bounce it outside the tackles? Seems like he can. Can he drop back in coverage? Sure. Can he rush the passer? Yeah, he can. So what is there not to like? What is there saying that he can't be a number 2 at the will spot behind Shemar James this year? There isn't much. There's not much. It's more so the extent at which he's able to do those things. That's the only question. Can he do it at a consistent rate against a higher level of competition, play in and play out? And I know I'm oversimplifying it, but at the end of the day, you have the traits. That's what coaching's for. That's what Jay Bateman's paid to do. That's what Austin Armstrong is paid to put him in a situation where he can make plays, play in, and play out. So I wouldn't say that just because Shemar James goes down, even though it's going to still be a hole if he isn't able to continue playing, even if this injury is more severe than we think it is, Manny Nunnery can step into this position and at least supplement, kind of produce in a form that doesn't immediately mean that Florida's doomed. Florida linebacker, the will spot is doomed. That's not what it means at all. Because when you flick on the tape, it looks like there are times where the light bulb goes off, but when it's on, it's on. And that's what Florida is looking to, or kind of hoping for from this Will Backer spot. Can he just be consistent and be able to perform, play in, and play out? And then you glance over at the man from Michigan, one of the best linebacker production factories that's going in college football right now, Deuce Spurlock. He's green. He's one of the green ones I talked about earlier. He's played in 2 games, very limited, both tune-up games for the Wolverines last season, redshirted the year, didn't see much, was mainly used on scout team for them during the week. But you see what Nunnery brings, and you say, oh, this kid has even more unknown than him. But they hope he can produce quickly. This is a kid that completely transformed his body when he went from the high school level to Michigan. He put on a good amount of muscle, made it look like he was ready to rock. He looks the part. And so now you're just asking, okay, he looks like he has the stature to perform and be a backer at the SEC level. It's just more so questions of he's a redshirt freshman. When can he see the field? When will he be prepared to see the field? He was always a project take for Michigan. Florida staff recruited him at Louisiana Lafayette. They understood that he was going to be a project even there. Can he step into that role if he's needed to? It's another unknown. And it's even more unknown than Nunnery. I can look back and I say, oh, this is what he did at Houston. This is what I think translates to the SEC. You don't have that with Spurlock. You have 3 tackles against Hawaii, and that's it. That's all you're looking at. And then you look one further down the list on the depth chart, and it's freshman Jaden Robinson, gifted athlete, one of the most productive players at the prep level last season in Florida's class. He was playing in a capacity that showed that he can perform in his Florida career down the line. But there's nothing saying that he should be ready to here. He will be ready to see the field this year beside potential snaps against McNeese State and Charlotte. There's nothing telling me that, because, and it's not a knock on him personally, but he's a true freshman that if you watched in high school last year, you'd have said, oh yeah, he needs 1 or 2 years of strict development before he's ready to rock. 1 to 2 years, not 1 to 2 games, not 1 to 2 months, years, seasons before he's ready to go. He was a raw talent at Columbia. He looked great. He was flying all over the field. I think he's one of the most consistent, or he was one of the most consistent pieces for Columbia last year. But I think he's just an overall byproduct of the current state of Florida high school football's community right now, in terms of just a lack of development. And a lot of it is pushed back on the lack of pay received by coaches in the state of Florida. This is the time where I should sit here and say, oh, pay Florida coaches, because it's true. There should be a higher number of, or there should be a system in place to award some of these coaches that have put years into developing young men on and off the field, the way it's done in Texas, the way it's done in Georgia, even California, because you're seeing a lot of the great coaching minds, the talents that are able to develop these kids, move to those states because they know they're going to get compensated fairly. They're going to have the college-ready guys in those places for the appropriate amount of money that Florida's not pumping into their, high school sports fund. So they're leaving. They're going in favor of those states, and I can't necessarily blame them. Unfortunately for Florida, for really every school, every team recruiting inside the state of Florida is having to look at the simple traits, or I don't even want to say simple, because a lot of them are gifted athletes. They are fantastic football players. They're fantastic basketball players, whatever. They're uber talented young men in the Sunshine State. There's plenty of them. Unfortunately, Robinson, as well as a handful of others that have gone to Florida and Alabama and Georgia and etc., the top schools in the nation, they're a casualty of the reality that there's just not much development going on in high school football right now. And that means that it takes more time to do so once they get to the collegiate level. You get a kid from Texas, he's going to be ready to go week 1. Xavier Filsame, I guarantee you he's going to be starting by, he'll be contributing by week 1 of next season in that safety rotation. But there's not many Florida athletes that are able to do so, that don't go to the IMG academies, to the American Heritage, to the St. Thomas Aquinas, Chaminade, Madonna, Prep. Prep schools are where it's at. If it's just if it's a public school, there is a lot of unknown that comes with getting some of those pieces. And let me just come out and say, even if Shemar does operate business as usual this season, he continues, and he doesn't suffer any type of setback. He is able to play week 1, and then he just gets ramped back up, similar to how Ricky was last year. It looked like he might miss week 1, came in. I'm not saying Shamar's going to miss week 1. This is all hypothetical. If he still plays, what I just did, this little breakdown of the Will linebacker spot at Florida, is still important, because it's the University of Florida. They want to rotate, especially under Austin Armstrong, where they're going to be running the heck out of these boys. They're going to be moving. They're going to be rotating. It's not a matter of if, but it's more so a matter of when. When is my name going to be called? When is Manny Nunnery going to get on the field? It's going to happen early and often because they need those pieces continuing to come in and come out. They have to have them. The way they want to play football, how aggressive, how fast-paced they want to play, the press man coverage that they're going to run, they're going to be moving, attacking the football. So it's important because these boys are going to play. So you got to watch out for the Manny Nunneries, the Deuce Spurlocks that might not have much, it might not be much of interest right now, but I guarantee you by in week one, when not only are they running that system, but they're also playing in Utah where the altitude is significantly different than it is here in Florida. Them boys going to be playing. They're going to be running. They're going to have to produce. You got to know who it's going to be. Manny Nunnery, Deuce Spurlock, Jaden Robinson, Derek Wingo, Taraja Mitchell, Shemar James, Scooby Williams. There's plenty. Consistent rotation. They're going to be moving in and out, and that's just at the linebacker spot. Like I said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And with that, we've come to an end of episode 5 of Carroll's Cadence. 5. I know we are just trucking along here, moving on quickly, but I want y'all to continue joining, continue feeling like y'all are at home. I want to continue giving y'all the best I can, episode in, episode out, making sure that this content is up to your standards, up to my standards, which my standards are very, very high. Just for myself, for this channel. I'm excited to continue growing with y'all. We're getting close to the 200 subscribers mark, and I just want to say join the family and be the one that pushes it over the 200 subscribers mark, because there's nothing more that I love knowing that I have 200 new friends that I need to mingle with moving forward. So I just wanted to say I appreciate all y'all. I appreciate everybody for watching. Have a great weekend, and I'll see y'all again on Monday. BC, gone.